So yeah, like was mentioned, so here's the thing. I work at Microsoft, and sometimes across like different companies and industries, the title they give you, it's different company to company. So about like a year ago, our team changed our titles from technical program managers to product managers, but I'm still doing the same work. And I only say that to say that a lot of times, don't get too stuck on the title for the job description. Understand what the work is. And that's how it's easy for you to really recognize whether or not you have those transferable skills, how to articulate those transferable skills to the work. So don't tie yourself necessarily to the actual title. But yes, I am a product manager at Microsoft. And I run two nonprofit organizations, one being Haitians In Tech, based here in Miami, and Code for South, which is part of like this huge network connected to the mothership Code for America, where we develop project ideas, civic tech ideas that are supposed to help enhance our community. They address community issues. We partner up with local nonprofits as well as local government to address the issues that matter to us at a local community level. And I'm really excited to share with you guys kind of like my journey into product management, because I'll give you a little backstory. I didn't do like a CS degree, so I didn't have like the conventional background that went into tech. I actually went to school bio major, Haitian, is lawyer, doctor, or engineer. And I think I've actually explored every route. So I was a bio major, and then my junior year, I switched my major to political science. And I took the LSAT, I was like, I'm gonna go to law school. But then I did a hackathon. It was startup weekend, it was a 72-hour hackathon. And from that moment on, I was like, I like building things. I like seeing a problem, identifying what the problem is, and just ideating on what could be something that helps solve it, right? So that started my journey into tech. I started going to these hackathons, networking events. I moved down to South Florida because I was in Tallahassee. And I really just got connected with the community. And I really implore you guys, part of like being a product manager is not just having the technical competency, right? It's really this communication, the ability to communicate with different people on your team, right? There's different stakeholders. So if you're a person who likes to work, within a team, and you can really negotiate conversations really well amongst people, then product management might be the role for you. I know a lot of people who graduated with a computer science degree, and the first job they get out of college is in product management. So it's not an unconventional route. And especially if you have somewhat of that technical background as you majored in CS, it does give you an upper hand in terms of being able to talk to different people from different skill levels in a language that matters to them. So this is a quote that I found, and it's from one of so Microsoft owns LinkedIn, or that's the association, so this is the VP of LinkedIn, and he said a great product manager has the brain of an engineer, the heart of a designer, and the speech of a diplomat. And I think that's very much so the type of skills you need in order to kind of navigate that career field. I kind of went over a little bit about my background, but my team, I work on the basically web direct team. So when you're buying a SMB product on Microsoft's website, my team optimizes that shopping cart experience across all the different global markets that we serve. Because you can understand different countries have different ways they pay, and customers have different ways they expect to be, for information to be shared with them, for them to be able to take the next step and next action. So our team goes about just optimizing to make sure that, well, more people buy in every country, and make those changes that would cause people to buy more. So one of the things, so this session is gonna be focused on almost like the day in the life of being a product manager. Like, how do I enter the space? Where's my mindset at? What do I have to do to get my work accomplished? And one of the things I always keep in mind is that we all remember the scientific method, right? Well, that's really what you're utilizing every single day when you're coming into the workplace. You're using the scientific method to ideate and hypothesize about what the next feature or product needs to be developed to reach your customer and reach the improvement of the bottom line at your company. So the scientific method, if we don't remember the definition, it's about finding out how nature works by making observations, asking questions, and testing ideas. And in our instance, we're examining human nature when they're navigating digital spaces. So every day, like, it's, as a product manager, you're creating products. Your feature is your product, right? And so you end up with a hypothesis. It's not the hypothesis isn't the first step, but it's the one that we always remember, right? So you're making some type of, you have some type of explanation as to why or how something is happening, and that helps you make further investigations. So the scientific method, again, I know this is a refresher, everybody already knows this, but the 6 steps, like I said, the hypothesis is only actually step 3. You actually have to ask this question. Like, what is it that you're trying to improve? You know, you have to ask the question about what is it that is the problem in the area that you're focusing on. So, like in my cart, it might be, why are customers dropping off after the 2nd step? You know, the 2nd step could be where they put their phone number in. And maybe we're asking them to input their phone number in a way that's confusing to them based on the country they're in, right? Sometimes it's things that we don't even really consider that may be impacting customers' experiences, right? In our tools, in our applications. So you have to ask the question of identify where there is something that you just don't understand. And so that requires background research. So we go into tooling, and you know, we look at data. We're like, okay, after step 1, about 20% of people drop off. You know, like gathering data across all these different areas to help you identify where you want to make that investment to improve your product. And that's going to help you form that hypothesis. And once you form that hypothesis, you're going to decide, hey, I'm going to build something that's going to impact this area, and that's my prediction is that it's going to improve it by, and usually when you make the prediction, it is a wild guess. Let me tell you, I have a feature, I'm like, oh, it's going to improve it by 50%. I don't have no equation for that number. That is the goal. So, you know, you just make a prediction that your improvement is going to improve, you know, the feature and increase the rate by 50%. So it's just a prediction, but it's a goal that you set for yourself. Just like, you know, I don't know, maybe in sports, maybe you set a goal of how many, I'm not a sports person, but how many goals you're gonna make, right? You set a goal or an intention so that you push yourself to actually reach it. So making that prediction is important, and then you test the prediction. So you build the thing. And does the thing actually help you reach the prediction? And that's when you draw your conclusion. So the day-to-day grind, really, as a PM, is that you're a mini CEO in your organization or your company. You're always ideating and pushing for the development of new features and products that's gonna serve your customers, and that's gonna increase the bottom line. But what's important in that whole process is that you're not doing it by yourself. You have to get the buy-in of your colleagues. Like, I have people who are designers on my team, so I don't have to worry about creating all the designs, but I have to be able to articulate the designs, you know, what I intend out of the designs with the designers. And I have to get their buy-in to prioritize developing the designs for my product versus, you know, another team's product. They have a backlog of things that they're getting requests for. So you have a lot of negotiating you're doing with various teams, partner teams. Otherwise, you'd end up being on one of those teams where they don't really have all the resources, and so you're doing 5 people's jobs. And that's no fun. So when you have the opportunity to have different people who specialize in different skills, you also have to be able to articulate what it is that you're building and why it's of value and why they would want to be part of that product with you. So how will you measure success? So going back to kind of like the metrics, you know, there's different types of metrics. When you're building a product, you have to know what type of metric is, am I trying to improve? And that will tell me that I've been successful. It could be time to value. So, you know, someone signs up on your application, and how soon after they've gone through the sign-up process, are they actually using your tool? If it takes them 3 months to actually use the tool, it's more likely that they'll probably never return, or it's not gonna be someone who's gonna have real long-term value for you. But maybe if a person's able to use your application or your tool within seconds of landing on your site, maybe there's better retention of that customer. And so just identifying what are the metrics that are gonna really matter for your feature or your product overall is really important to identify. And I gave some examples of those, like, new customer sign-offs, drop-off, like I mentioned earlier, completion rate, retention rate, onboarding rate, expansion, partial churn. If I were to define it, is like, whenever you have those subscriptions where you can have multiple people on your account, let's say like Netflix, right? But if you drop 3 accounts, that's a partial churn for that one membership, right? Because they started off with 4 people and they were charging you for 4 people, but now you have 1 person on the account. So that's a partial churn. A full churn would be you just closed the whole entire account. So they've lost, the whole membership. So those types of things, you don't wanna measure all of them. Really, when you're building a product, you wanna identify the one thing that you wanna improve and really build what we call iteratively, right? So, don't try and attack all the areas all at once. You're trying to attack one area, one at a time, and really build the product, the MVP out. Not build this big, massive infrastructure in the beginning that's so complicated to kind of keep track of. Build something, the MVP, that's simple, where you have one simple success metric that you're keeping track of, and then grow and add to it as you go. So I have a link to a spec template, and it's a pretty lengthy one. This one's a technical spec, so I hate writing specs. I really do. I struggle with this so much. But it's definitely something that if you practice at, it's gonna be to your benefit. It's gonna allow you to communicate your ideas to all those different stakeholders that I mentioned, whether it's your designers, your data scientists, like everybody who you need to come to the table to come to an agreement about your product or your feature. This is gonna help them all be on the same page. And it's gonna help you deliver your product, your feature on time. And timing is important. It's a resource, right? Because timing also equates to how much money and other time that could be spent on other projects that just don't get done. So having a roadmap and having everybody on the same page is really important. And I would very much implore you, Stack Overflow is like, it's awesome. I know the engineers out there, when I used to code, like Stack Overflow used to help me out of a lot of pickles. But this guide right here, this spec template, is really awesome. And this one is a little bit more technical. It's geared more towards engineers. Like on my team, I would do like a PM's template, but I'm not gonna put like data models or schemas in my PM spec. But then the dev will do another spec where he goes into a little bit more detail. And I know these terminologies that I'm using are a little out there and you may not be familiar with it. It's cool. I will give you a link to these slides so you can check out these links on your free time, but just know that it's really just a rubric of information that you want to have. If you're entrepreneurial at all, you're a product manager. Okay, if you have any aspirations to build out a product and be the CEO of your own company, then you're a product manager and you should have this all laid out. And this will help you in finding the right team members and being able to articulate your ideas. So I just copied some of the sections that are represented in that spec document, but like I said, you don't have to do all the sections. It may not apply for your particular product, but again, it has, I think, for the most part, all the important kind of like sections that you would want to incorporate in a spec document. So now that you know what a spec document is, now that you know how to approach developing a product, it's about really building your portfolio. So I'm gonna transition from the day-to-day life and go into more like, how do you get a role as a product manager at a company? Like I said earlier, it's not really the title, because people ask me this all the time. They're like, what's the difference between a project manager and a program manager, a technical program manager and a product manager? And I'm like, to be honest, I don't look at the title so much, I look at the job description itself. What is it that I'm doing on the day-to-day? What am I responsible for? I have a hypothesis that there might be slight differences between, let's say, a product manager and a project manager or a program manager. The way I articulate it is that sometimes I feel like program managers are more oriented towards a project or a program, but it's not an actual product. So like, I mean, it's in the words in the name, but I don't even think that's accurate, because I feel like sometimes different companies just, they throw in everything in the same box. So again, take that with that's the caveat there. So build the real thing I wanted to do in the other slide, which is remind you guys to build your portfolio. Because sometimes I feel like people think that you don't have experience, you didn't get the internship, but there's so much opportunities for you to still build your portfolios through these hackathons. And even if you're a product manager, you having the experience working with the team and being able to articulate through a spec document what you guys did, that is what matters in your portfolio as a product manager. You don't even have to code it all out. You know, just having the Figma designs and being able to articulate the use case and the information that you gathered as to why you built it, how you built it, and all the steps that you went through in the scientific method is really what you need in that product manager portfolio that you build for yourself. So identify 3 really great products, right, through these hackathons, and I think you will have a greater success at closing that internship or that first entry-level position. So these are the type of interview questions that you'll get as a product manager. And I pulled this from one of the books that everybody recommends you read right before you interview for a product manager role, and it's called Cracking the PM Interview. And so they'll ask you, how many pizzas are delivered in Manhattan? What they're trying to test is how you think. There's no right or wrong answer to any of these, but it's how do you think? How do you go about problem solving? How do you go about identifying where information is located, who to go to, who's the right stakeholder? And so if you look at these questions, they're really basic, but they really give the interviewer a very good idea about how do you think as someone who's architecting a tool. So how many pizzas are delivered in Manhattan? How I would go about answering that question is trying to find a source of information that tells me about all the pizza parlors and what are the pizza parlors, who are the pizza parlors reporting to? Whether it's looking at their financials, like extrapolating from information and where they place that information. So and this is just at the top of my head right now, but I don't know much about pizzas. How do you design an alarm clock for the blind? So in an interview, you're just giving them an idea of how your mind would work around this particular problem. What would be your step 1, your step 2, your step 3? And so these are really good questions, but some sources, because you want to prep for these interviews, right? Next slide. Some really good sources to help you prep for these interviews. One that I used when I applied at Microsoft was Try Exponent. So I was moving from an engineer role to a product role. So it was like random. I was burnt out as an engineer, and I was just like, I need to change. I'm that person, like I told you, I've switched my major so many times. Like when I decide I want to try something new, I just do it. I just look it up, just Google, YouTube, how to do it. And so I found this website. I saw some people on YouTube doing mock interviews, and it gave really good interview prep. So I'm not recommending that one specifically, but I'm saying that there are websites where you can find those types of resources where they can prep you on the types of questions that you're most likely encounter in your internship interview or in that entry-level position interview. And a lot of times those people actually work at the company, so they know the actual questions. So it's a great resource to tap into. Now, here are the book recommendations I would say that you want to look into. So Cracking the PM Interview is like the holy grail. They have one for software engineers called Cracking the Coding Interview. And so this is the PM version of that. You want to check that out. The second one, funny story. So I met the author of the second one at an airport in DC, like outside of DC. And this is a really great book, and the reason I say it was really great is because one of the use cases they mentioned in the book was around how one feature that Amazon had implemented at the time really ended up helping them was like the recommendation feature, like recommending another product. For everybody else, like in this day and age, we're like, oh my God, that's old, every website has it. But at a certain time, that wasn't part of your e-commerce experience. And it was an intern who actually who made that suggestion for that new feature. And it was a huge, huge success. And so me, working on basically the e-commerce on a cart experience, it was really great to see how one person, an intern, can have an idea that has such an impact that not only does it transform that company, in terms of their bottom line, but it changes the whole industry where that's the standard, right? The next one is 0 to 1, and that's from Peter Thiel. He's a pretty big deal in the tech space. He was involved in PayPal and just like a whole bunch of other products. And so it's a really great book to get an idea of his position on what takes a company from 0 to 1. And sometimes we think 0 to 1, that's just a small step, but that's the biggest step. And so I definitely implore you guys to check that out. And the last one just released, Building for Anyone. I had to mention it because she's also Haitian, Annie Jean Baptiste. She's at Google. She's the head of product for product and inclusion at Google. And it's just a really great book for us to really think about accessibility when we're building our products. You have to understand, not everybody who's using your products has the same experiences as you. And it's all about how do we optimize getting more people to be satisfied with our product. Someone who's who has visual impairments may not, experience your tooling the same way as someone who has 20/20 vision, or someone with auditory, impairments. All these things matter in building a product. And like I mentioned earlier, my team, we're a global team. One of the things, because we're very US-centric, we don't understand that in other countries, we're so used to reading things left to right. In other countries, their language, it's right to left. Like, these minor things can really, if you need to be able to think about them to incorporate new ideas of approaching how do you get those customers to use your product more effectively, more efficiently, and so on and so forth. So, that's the end of my long rant. I wanted to have this be a little bit more interactive, because I know you guys have hackathons and stuff that you're gonna be doing, so I wanted to make an opportunity for us to kind of like have a discussion about how you are, like questions that you may have around different technologies that you want to implement in a product, or how you're approaching a hackathon product that you're using. So I'm just actually gonna leave the floor open. I have some quick ideas up here, but don't hold yourself to these ideas or these tiles that I have up here. Feel free to just ask me questions related to what you're working on. And yeah, so I'm leaving the floor open up to you.
Touch more on your educational journey, specifically surrounding what you do now, as opposed to transitioning from your role? Like, were there other things that you studied aside from the interview question?
Were there other things that I studied outside of the interview questions to prep for my product role? Yeah, so like I mentioned, my prior role to product manager, I was a software engineer, and I did a boot camp. So it was like a 3-month full-time boot camp, Wincode Academy, which is now Brain Station. And so in those 3 months, I mean, I just dedicated myself to just really learning what it was to be an engineer, because I had, like I mentioned, I came into tech more so as an entrepreneur. I wanted to build the thing, but I didn't really know how to code it, and I wasn't gonna go back to school to learn, but I'm very industrious. Like, I'm gonna YouTube, Google, go to the events, networking events, try and figure it out. That's just my style. And to be honest, I just crashed and burned going that methodology. But I still recommend it. Sometimes crashing and burning is just it's a great learning experience as well. So I had hired engineers abroad, and I just wasted a lot of my own hard-earned money, and I was just like, why aren't they able to build the thing that I need? And so instead of like saying it was like, oh, it's the engineer's fault and blah, 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 I was like, maybe there's something I don't get and I'm not communicating what I want built correctly. And so that's when I decided, okay, I wanna do this entrepreneur thing again, but this time, let me do a boot camp so that I actually know what it is that software engineers are actually doing when when I ask them to build X, Y, and Z. And so that's kind of like started me being more technical, I would say, is me doing the boot camp, which was just 3 months full time, but it really gave me a foundation to really understand like what the software architecture space was like and what it is that I needed to communicate to engineers. And that experience as going through the boot camp and working as a software engineer, that was beneficial when I decided I wanted to make the transition into product management. But I didn't really do much prep, I would say, for the product management other than, like I said, going on YouTube, looking up mock interviews for technical program manager role at Microsoft. And then I came across like this YouTube channel called Try Exponent, and I went on their website. I saw that I got the interview opportunity at Microsoft, and so I did Try Exponent for like the week to study the questions, and it's history from there. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, you did. That's phenomenal. Any questions, y'all?
I have a question.
Hold up.
Was that okay?
I actually work at Microsoft with Whitney, but I'm still curious, what is the interview process like? Because I know my interview process was completely different than yours, since we work in different disciplines. So can you share more about that?
So the interview process, so it's the typical multi-round, you interview with multiple people. So I went through a particular program at Microsoft called Microsoft Leap. And this is a really great program for those who are taking an unconventional transition into tech, especially me transitioning from an engineer role to a PM role, and not having like the CS background. Now, if you do have a computer science background, you can go through Leap. Again, it's more so for people who are transitioning from like another career or another industry into tech. If you have a CS background and whatnot, then they'll redirect you to like the university recruiters. But I went through the Microsoft Leap program, so my interview process is a little bit different because I was able to work as like an apprentice within Microsoft for about 6 months, where I was able to build that rapport with the different team members, and they could see kind of like how I thought, So it was very much a learning space, a learning time for me to really see how does internally Microsoft work, what tooling, how do they go about like product management. Now they call it product management, but at the time the role was technical program manager. And so for me, after those 5 months or 5-6 months, it's like the team kind of knew you. And so yes, we did do an interview. They offered me to interview for the role full time. But I feel like my interview process was a little bit informal at that point. But I think it is still similar in the sense that you still interviewed with multiple people, you spoke to multiple team members, partner teams that you probably will end up working with, and they asked basically these types of questions. I had only one person ask me very, very, very early on before I got my apprenticeship a coding question. And again, I was like, I I told him how I would go about it, but I didn't necessarily solve the problem. I just was able to articulate what I would do to solve it. And then the rest of the interviews were questions, like I said, like earlier, which were like, oh, how would you build a bridge in San Francisco? You know, there's traffic, it takes people 5 hours to get from point A to point B, and basically telling them what my process would be in terms of evaluating that situation and building out a solution. So that was my interview process, and I think I interviewed with like that was like my final interview process after the apprenticeship, and I think I interviewed with 4 or 5 people, and I built out my portfolio. They didn't ask for a portfolio, but I had built out a portfolio and I presented that to them to show them how I thought. Even though I felt like I was in the bag, I had the interview in the bag at that point, I had the job in the bag, but I still presented that presentation to really show them I was serious and that, you know, I wasn't new to this. Oh. So that's a great question. And that is something we're hacking on as we speak, okay? So it's like, as soon as it was kind of like announced to everyone and all the teams, like we have these, I think it's quarterly, we have these quarterly hackathons at Microsoft, internal hackathons. So that means for the week, everybody's meetings are canceled and you just ideate around something. And so one of the things that Satya kind of like everybody was talking about was how do we implement AI in your particular product? So for us, AI is about kind of like giving a better cart experience or addressing questions and providing information in the cart flow that might help you complete your purchase. But depending on your other product, you know, whether it's Excel, Teams, it might be executed in a different way. But we're still in that exploratory phase. Like I had a meeting yesterday and I was like, I still don't know yet. So, you know, I'm still sitting down kind of like thinking about, I need to gather the data about where is it that maybe AI would provide more value to customers. But it's I think it's so early on that, you know, anybody can kind of like win or really create your footprint in the space. AI is just one of those tools, and maybe it's not applicable in the particular section that I work in within the cart. Maybe it is. It's something that somebody has to prove out, that thesis. And we've had a couple of people provide some examples of that, but that person has not been me.
Of your coworkers who do similar role to you, have y'all chatted about your educational experiences? Do you find that people have a similar educational journey to you, like going through maybe a boot camp or a coding academy, or did they go through the traditional college route? Have y'all had those conversations before?
Yeah, so I feel like on my team, maybe I lucked out. I really do feel like I lucked out with my team. We have a range of experiences. Like my first manager, she was an English major and she's been at Microsoft for over 20 plus years. And then my skip, which is like the manager right above her, right? He didn't even have a college degree when he started at Microsoft, but he had the entrepreneurial background, so he had built stuff that showed that, you know, he had this competency in the space and he could excel. And so he didn't have necessarily that conventional college background either. And so I think just knowing that about my colleagues really provided me comfort. And this might be unique to just like, you know, Microsoft. It may not be the same for other teams. And it just might be my team and Microsoft. So I can't say that every team, there's like, I forget how many employees. It's a lot of employees at Microsoft. So, you know, not everybody's experience is gonna be the same. But yeah, on my team, one person, he was a journalist, I believe, and he's a product manager. So everybody's coming from different spaces. I don't think you need to be like the best coder. Like I was not the best engineer prior to becoming a product manager. But I had an idea about like the infrastructure, and I just love to ask questions. Like when I went into my apprenticeship, I was just like, I just need to ask as many people questions. there's no such thing as a dumb question. The more time people get to interact with you because you're asking questions and they're forced to give you that information, the more of an imprint you make actually on the person, and basically it kind of just creates this opportunity for you to really stand out. I think a lot of times we go into these spaces thinking we have to know all of the things, and that's not the case, especially you just have to be the person who knows how to ask a lot of questions. Because a lot of times you're gonna ask the question that a lot of people didn't even know to think to ask, but that is very important. And it sparks a light bulb, and somebody's like, you know what? We didn't think of that. I don't have the answer for that. That's something we need to explore. So I would say, like, yeah, a lot of people on my company, or at least on my team, let me not say the company, I lucked out on my team, come from a range of different experiences and different backgrounds. They didn't necessarily have a CS background, and I mean, it just worked.
And then my last question would be, can you touch on your utilization of LinkedIn and networking and how that's been beneficial for you in deepening your tech journey?
Oh yeah, I'd be on that LinkedIn. I wasn't that person before. Like when I first started networking, I was just like the shy person in the corner, like. And my friend, one of my best friends, she's more of like the outgoing person. She was like, she got a scholarship for track. She was just like, she's a go-getter. You know, she has that competitive mindset. So for her, socializing and being amongst people and talking to people was a lot easier. Whereas me, I was just like, let me scope this out. Like my inner introvert was just not there. Like it just wasn't for networking. But I think that shifted, like the more I kind of just, again, practice. You put yourself in those spaces that make you uncomfortable, and then you start getting comfortable. And so now I take that into the digital space. Like for me, COVID was awesome because I connected with so many people virtually, and it wasn't until like 2-3 years later I met them in person. So like people I had been communicating with and tossing, ideas or talking about tech on Twitter, I didn't meet them until like a year, 2 years later, at a conference. So I definitely use Twitter and LinkedIn primarily to build relationships within the tech space. And YouTube, like, there are people who create tutorials that I really like. Again, if I go to a conference and I meet you in person, like that's how I really kind of build up my network. And I use, excuse me, that's the baby. I burp a lot with her. And I use LinkedIn to really connect with people who work at the companies that I'm interested in working in, or who are doing things that I find, interesting. So like the Anna at Google, like I find her interesting. She's Haitian, so I'm gonna reach out to her. There's things that we have in common, and I use that as a way to introduce myself and what they're doing. Tell them what it is that they're doing that I really want to get some additional insight. And I just use LinkedIn to just get to know the people who are doing awesome work, and kind of allow it to not be so professional, but be just natural. And I think that has worked for me thus far, is just using it to connect with people and not putting a lot of pressure on myself, but hey, who's doing some really awesome work? Like recently, I've gotten into the whole NFT space, but more so from a music space. So there's this company called Royalty Exchange, and they do like, it's basically you're able to get the music artists are able to give you royalties for their music. So they're like, it's like you're stock trading on their music catalog, if that makes sense, and earning royalties on it. So I got really interested in a competitor of them just came out, and so I reached out to the CEO. I was like, hey, I've been actually following your competitor for X amount of years, and I see that you guys recently launched. I'd love to schedule some time to chat. I'm just really curious about where they are going, since they're a new company and they just got funding. But I say that to say that whatever it is that you're interested in, you're curious about, don't feel intimidated about reaching out to the person who has, that subject matter expertise and asking them if they have a quick minute to jump on Zoom, 13, 15 minutes, to to chat about it. Yes, you might get some no's, but that's life. That's okay. You know, a no doesn't sting that much. It doesn't, you know, it happens. But a lot of times you'll get a lot of yeses. And that's been my experience. I've gotten a lot more yeses that I can remember than the no's. Because like the no's, they'll happen, but once you get several yeses, like you forget about the no's. And so I think just go ahead and use LinkedIn and Twitter, but really know what drives your passion, and be curious and be willing to be vulnerable to say, hey, would you be available to chat with me?
Well, everyone give a round of applause for Whitney. Oh, you have a question, I'm sorry.
I wanted to hear a little bit about how you're integrating blockchain into what you're doing, if you don't mind.
So that's a little bit difficult because you know, once you're at certain size companies, it's a lot more difficult to get that buy-in for certain technologies, right? And in my particular space, so where I've ideated around blockchain, it doesn't really, that portion of it is not owned by us. So the area that I've been thinking about blockchain has been with payment instruments, and the payment instruments portion is not owned directly on my team. It's a partner team. So it's like we would have to make the request to implement said feature by that partner team. And again, that partner team has their own priorities of payment instruments that they're willing to implement. And then you have like the economic climate that creates this tension and fear about investing resources into something so novel. So in my particular role, just based on the parameters of like what I can do with our product, I haven't implemented it, but I have been thinking about it, and I've made requests and done user studies, but even if it does get accepted, it's owned by another partner team, and so we can just make the request and try and push them to prioritize it, but it's not my engineering team that would build it out. I'm not familiar with what Jack Dorsey, what issue specific to Square? Oh, I don't know nothing about the PPP loans and what they're doing, so I don't know. But in terms of the technology, it's Square itself, yeah. Like I said, we have a partner team who specifically implements new payment instruments. So our engineering team is not going to necessarily do that. We may make the requests and try and keep track of where that partner team is in terms of delivering on that request, but we're not necessarily building out the new payment instrument. And so I'll give an example, different, like even in some countries, like let's say Asia, Alipay and stuff like that, like those are payment instruments that are gonna be more prevalently used in those countries. So what we would do is just make that request, hey, we are thinking that, we would have more people complete our shopping cart experience if we had this additional payment instrument, but it is still up to the purview of the partner team who implements the payment instruments to prioritize it and actually build it out, so. No, it's inside of Microsoft, but every feature is broken out into different teams. So it's there's not one team who owns a whole infrastructure. Even if you look at the team's application itself, the menu itself could be owned by a completely different team. So different things are segmented different ways. And so it's a lot of collaboration, even for just what you think is a small thing can still be broken up further.
Brief 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we'll hop right into Tamante. Give Whitney a round of